I took the entire $10,000 and he promptly went off and spent it. He commissioned me. Hey, want to keep your job? Build me some phono preamplifiers that'll pass the FCC. We'll put it in, I'll pay for the parts. So I did. He had drilled 4 holes through the floor and anchored this thing into the ground beneath the living room. And he was married. My name is Paul McGowan. Today, PS Audio it's a multi-million-dollar corporation, 40 people. We make high-end audio equipment. We sell it all over the world. But it wasn't always that way. When we first started years ago, it was just 2 of us, Stan Warren and myself. My dad was always interested in electronics, and I know a lot of that rubbed off on me and got me interested in electronics. And over the years, I had built a number of things. I built my own hi-fi. I cobbled together a turntable and an old subwoofer, and I put together a pretty decent little hi-fi. After I had gotten out of the Army and had gotten a job as a disc jockey, I started getting interested in synthesizers and was determined to build the world's first polyphonic synthesizer. Musical synthesizers at the time were what's known as one-note wonders. You could only hit 1 note at a time. They were voltage-controlled keyboards, and they only worked 1 note at a time, and I was determined to kind of fix that. And I thought, well, it shouldn't be that hard to build a polyphonic synthesizer, meaning that instead of just being able to hit 1 note at a time, you could hit 10 notes at a time. So I designed this idea, built it into a product, sold a musician who, his name was Walter Carlos, and Walter Carlos at the time had made the single most popular classical album of its day called Switched on Bach. Had done it with a single note Moog synthesizer, and he used a multi-track tape recorder to create this wonderful work. And I had convinced Walter that he needed to buy this product, which I called Infinitizer. I had gotten an investment from one of the local kids that I hung around with. I think they invested like $10,000 in Infinitizer, and I had immediately done the worst thing that you could do in business. I took the entire $10,000 and I handed it over to the subcontractor who was going to build Infinitizer for me, and he promptly went off and spent it. So before you knew it, that was the end of Infinitizer. I had lost the investment due to my inept business practices. And at the station, the FCC had come in and done an audit, a technical audit of the station, and found that there was too much noise, and I forgot what else was going on, and they made a number of violations for the station. Now, the owner of the station was running that thing on a shoestring. It was a, I don't want to say a fly-by-night operation, because that's not what it was, but he was struggling. It was tough. So part of it was they needed new phono preamplifiers for the turntables, and he couldn't afford to go out and buy an off-the-shelf phono preamplifier, and he knew that I knew electronics, so he commissioned me. Hey, want to keep your job? Build me some phono preamplifiers that'll pass the FCC. We'll put it in, I'll pay for the parts. So I did. I built them up. We measured them, we put them in, and at the end of this whole thing, I wound up with my parts being paid. I got to keep my job as a disc jockey, and I had this box, this phono preamplifier in a Roytan cigar box run by 2 9-volt batteries, and I got curious about it. I had played it on my stereo system. It sounded pretty damn good. So I wondered, well, how good is this thing? So one of our sponsors, Ball Waterbed Company, was owned by a man named Norm. Now, Norm was a well-known hi-fi guy in the community. He was rumored to have this big giant stereo system, and so I went and talked to Norm. I showed him my little box, and he said, yeah, you really should try that on a real hi-fi system, but you're not hooking that up to mine. I said, why? And he goes, it doesn't even plug in. I have an expensive system. No way. But I do know somebody who likes to fiddle with such stuff, I have a waterbed installer that works for me. His name's Stan Warren. And Stan had a Rabco turntable, a Dynaco PAT4 preamplifier, and an SAE 31B power amplifier. He had a pair of transmission line homemade speakers with a Heil air motion transformer on top for the tweeter. It was a really good sounding system. And the first thing that I noticed when I walked into Stan's house was the turntable occupied the back half of the living room. And this turntable sat on a wooden platform of which he had drilled 4 holes through the floor and anchored this thing into the ground beneath the living room. And he was married. And we listened, and Stan was, did A-B comparisons, very impressed. I thanked him, didn't hear back from him for another week until there was a knock on my door. And I opened the door, and it was Stan. And he's, in typical Stan fashion, not much for conversation or words, he sat down and plunked $500 cash down on the table. He said, well, I want to buy half your company. Okay. He said, we'll call it Paul and Stan Audio, and we'll build these boxes of yours. And I said, we're going to sell these little Roytan cigar boxes? He said, no. We're going to put it in a fancy little box. We'll get rid of the batteries and plug it in. And I said, well, who in the hell is going to buy this little box that all it does is just amplify a turntable? And he goes, audiophiles. What's an audiophile? All right, part 2 next week. Thanks for watching.